Call of Duty fans, welcome back. It's good to see you guys. IHOLDSHIFT with you on the channel as we're dealing with live in Minnesota action for you guys for the CDL Launch Weekend. All 12 pro teams will be playing. Each will be playing 2 matches. And then beyond that, we've got a handful, more than a handful, of amateur teams that'll be going up against each other in the challenger side of the bracket. Now, the best way for me to break this thing down is honestly just to go team by team to give you guys your predictions, your expectations, and who you might be looking to bet on or bet against as we get into the weekend if you're into that kind of thing. So let's start things off and just look at what the days look like first, and then we'll go over each of the teams as far as what you might be able to expect as far as will teams go 2-0, will they go 0-2, or will they find somewhere in the middle at a 1-1. The first day is an interesting one. Chicago will be playing up against Dallas to start the entire season off. Seattle and Florida also pinned up to be a pretty good matchup in the second, and then the Los Angeles Guerrillas will be playing up against the home team Minnesota Rokkr to finish off Friday. On Saturday, New York will be playing up against London, Toronto, and Seattle. The Guerrillas again will be going up, but this time against Florida. And then we've got Optic Gaming LA going up against Paris, and then the Atlanta FaZe to finish off the night against the Dallas Empire. Tough draw for Dallas in the first weekend. And then the final day on Sunday will be Paris versus London. Little battle of EU there. Chicago, Optic Gaming LA, New York going up against the Atlanta FaZe, and then the Battle of the North, Toronto going up against Minnesota. Let's start things off, and let's just do this alphabetically. Talking about this Atlanta FaZe squad first. Of course, they have kind of risen to the top of the power rankings across just about every single facet, including coaches' polls, and rightfully so. They go on that huge winning streak where they don't barely drop a map for almost 100 total maps that they play. And now they've got an opportunity to really set the tone for the season as they got Dallas first and then New York. Atlanta's a team, in my opinion, that's going to go 2-0 for you. I got them against this Dallas squad finding at least a 3-1, if not potentially finding a sweep, but I definitely do not have them losing to Dallas. And then the same thing against New York. I don't think it's going to be all that close. Maybe New York steals a map, but I think, honestly speaking, Atlanta's the strongest team when it comes to the early season stuff. That's your expectation as far as who's going to be walking away with a 2-0 easily. I think Atlanta, against some pretty good opponents, mind you, will still find a way to go 2-0. Going over to the Chicago Huntsmen, however, they've got Dallas first, again, starting things off. Then they've got to wait an entire day, and they play Optic Gaming LA midday on Sunday. Personally speaking, the Chicago-Dallas game, I've got going the way of Dallas at a 3-1 scoreline, simply because Dallas has been handling Chicago without much problem. Although, Chicago has been getting better, and they've been able to take a couple more maps off of Dallas. I just think in the environment, when it comes to having picks and bans in place, I don't see Dallas dropping 2 maps against this Chicago team, let alone 3. And then to finish things off against Optic Gaming LA, I've got Chicago, no problem, 3-0 there. So I got Chicago finishing 1-1 on the weekend, although I will say Chicago is getting a plus 120 or so just as a match winner against Dallas. And if you're feeling the feistiness that Chicago might be able to take, then that's a bet line worth going for. Going to Dallas, we just talked about Chicago. I've got them beating the Chicago team 3-1, but then they have to go up against Atlanta, and that happens on Saturday night. So they've got 2 barn burners of matches as they're playing up against, again, 2 top 3 squads, them being the other of the 3, depending on how you have them ordered. Those are all 3 of the top teams currently, and I think it's pretty clear and definitive that that's the case. So it's a tough draw for the Dallas team. Unfortunately, I don't see them, like I mentioned, able to play up against this Atlanta squad. I've got them splitting the weekend going 1-1. Now, here's where things get a little bit more interesting as we talk about the Florida Mutineers. This is a squad that I feel like is being pretty heavily slept on at the moment, and I think could actually do a little bit of work with their current schedule to potentially walk away 2-0 on the weekend. They play Seattle first, who have looked like they've been coming into their stride, but Florida has been getting dramatically better the more and more that they play teams like Chicago, which they've been doing a lot of recently. This one I could see going either way. I've got it going to map 5 specifically, and I can see potentially Florida taking this one. I think in my general favor, I've got Seattle winning this one. I think that's the general expectation, but I think there's a big possibility that Florida can take that first series coming in the second match of day number 1. And then they play the Los Angeles Guerrillas, which I think will be a pretty considerable, at least a 3-1, if not better. And Florida might be one of those squads that very well could start the weekend off 2-0. Not bad, considering that a lot of people have them in their power rankings below the 8th spot, which I don't know is necessarily merited, but we'll see pretty quickly here as they will play up against that good Seattle team early on. Going to the London Royal Ravens, though, next. This is another team that I think could potentially go 2-0 to start. It just comes down to the matchup that they have early versus New York. That'll happen day number 2, first set up. I've got that one going 5 with potential of London to surprise. There have been a handful of rankings that have had London near the very bottom of their power rankings, and I don't think those are correct at all. I think there's absolutely some power here in this London squad where they could have a couple of all-star moments and steal a couple of maps away from a more solid, more well-rounded team that I think in anyone's mind when it comes to New York. Personally, I've got London winning that one in Game 5. Going over to Paris, it's the worst team in the league. They're going to win that one 3-1 at least, if not a 3-0. London very well could be another one of those squads to start things off 2-0 for their regular season. And then we go to the Los Angeles Guerrillas. We already talked about some of their things when it came down to them playing Florida, but they have Minnesota first. And personally, I think Los Angeles and the Guerrillas are going to be lucky to walk away with 2 or more maps on the weekend. I've got them losing 0-3 to Minnesota and 1-3 to Florida. This is a team that I think absolutely goes 0-2. I'm near the bottom of my power rankings, and the schedule really does not favor them too much. You would like to see them do well against Florida if you're an LAG fan, but I just don't necessarily think it's going to happen. Not early on, not this weekend. And then going to the home team, the Minnesota Rokkr, like we mentioned, they'll be playing up against the Los Angeles Guerrillas. I've got them with a 3-0, and how about this? Minnesota Rokkr, they're going to pin up a 2-0 on the series set, and they're probably not going to drop a map as they'll play Toronto up next, although Toronto has looked pretty good, but I still feel like people are underestimating this Minnesota Rokkr squad. I've got them going 2-0 and 6-0 in the maps to start off their regular season. Going to the New York Subliners next, this is a team that very well could go 0-2. Again, it comes down to that pivotal matchup for me in day number 2, first set up versus London. I've got it going 5 to London's direction, and then they play Atlanta. Not really feeling good about that one either, as I have them going personally 0-2, which is not how you want to start things off for the New York Subliners. Optic Gaming LA, they play Paris and Chicago. We already talked about that Chicago team. I don't see the shell of Optic playing up against the majority of what was the Optic dynasty and doing well. Not this early, maybe future down the road, but not this early. Going up against Paris though, you got to favor OGLA in that one. I've got them winning that one 3-1 and splitting the difference in their first weekend, going 1-1 on the weekend as a whole. And this Paris team, again, we've already talked about what they're kind of struggling with. You know, it's one of those things like between them and Toronto, the starting 5 could be very different from one day to the next. They will be dealing with a set roster that will include all 3 Aussies and Lucas, Shocks, and Dens. Kismet will be starting, and Zed will be starting for that squad. I don't mind the roster. I'm just a little bit confused on why Brezi's not playing, and I think there's some consideration for Phantoms as an AR player, but regardless, this team is just a little bit all over the place for me, and I don't have them winning a set here this weekend. I've got them going 1-3 versus Optic and 1-3 versus London. And then the Seattle squad, again, for me, it just comes down to what happens in that battle versus Florida early in to this weekend as they play the second set on the first day. Again, I got that one going 5. I have that favoring Seattle, but I very well could see that being Florida's game. So personally, I've got them going at least 1-1 as they play Toronto second in day 2. That one should be a pretty easy 3-0 or 3-1 for them, but it just comes down to that Florida matchup. So will they either split the difference or go 2-0? That's one to definitely keep an eye on for. And then Toronto, again, one of those squads that just are not there yet. Again, a rotating 10-man roster that we just don't know who to expect day in and day out. Of course, they have set their roster, and I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about it. Generally speaking, it feels like it's a roster that is kind of just getting it done for now, although they have been playing better in scrims, but it feels weird that Brack isn't starting. That's Methods, Looney, Classic, Kemi, and Metals that are starting, leaving Brack, Lucky, Kleenex, Bance, and Mayhem on the bench. It just feels a little bit strange that that's the roster that they're coming out with, but personally, going up against Seattle and Minnesota, 2 tough opponents off the get-go. I don't think they win either of those games, no matter who they put out there, and they're going to go 0-2 on the weekend. Again, a lot of stuff happening in the Challengers department as well. 160, 170 plus teams that are going to be here. The seeding is a little bit all over the place, so I'll be not really doing much as far as giving predictions on who's going to go far, who's not going to go far, because let's be honest, we just don't know who's going to go where when it comes to the bracket as a whole. So definitely keep your eye on for the Challenger stuff that's happening. I know there's been a lot of controversy about them playing in a parking garage. I think the aesthetic is actually pretty cool. It's warm, it's heated, it's fine. I'm just a little bit worried about what the sound is going to be like. It's going to feel like an echo chamber, I think, and the noise that's going to be picked up on mics might be a little bit too much to deal with. So keep your eye out on that to see who might be the best Path to Pro Challengers team in our first weekend. Again, I'll be bringing recaps to you guys after every single weekend with some more breakdown stats and things that you like to see. So if you like the content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell if you want to get little blips to know when my videos do pop up. Till next time, hope you guys keep holding it down. Later. Bye-bye.